How do I share my screen now? I've done this. So one of these screen share. Okay. So did you want me to start?
Someone is connected, no?
How do you tell?
On the Hangout screen. Oh, no, it's
Just
you
me?
now. I thought there was someone.
Should I just ask in Slack if anybody's planning on joining?
Yeah. So successful.
The recording's just going to be loads of me asking, should I start now?
So it's just going to be like, as Dennis and me. So, tell us, how does it work?
What questions do you want us to ask?
He's already recording.
Whoa. This is not a nice sandwich. Okay, should we get started?
Yeah.
All right. So, as part of the acceptance test work, we had the idea that, so one of the issues that we were having was that you would rely on, for instance, hey, so I was just saying, so as part of the acceptance test work, we were having the issue where like a different service would fail. So for instance, the account service was unreliable, and so that was breaking acceptance tests. But that wasn't really like the responsibility of Titan to find those things. That was an issue with the acceptance or integration version of that service. So to kind of just isolate Titan and just have that in acceptance just running with its own things, it'd be really nice to have doubles for the services that it relies on. So it was Juan and I did a little investigation into what are the available solutions to do that. So from what I understand, there's a couple of ways that you can approach this. So either like within the application itself, you can have something that sits there and is intercepting all the traffic and then can play it back. So there's a couple of solutions for this. There's one which is called like ExVCR. So it takes something that was in Ruby called VCR and it repurposes that for Titan. I think Lee was keen on going with that, but we didn't like that solution so much. So the thing with that is that now Titan is also responsible for doing all of the doubling, and you would have to necessarily sit as part of that application, or you'd split it out into a separate Elixir app, which didn't really feel like, you know, you really gain the best out of it in that case. So the other problem with that ExVCR one is that it looks kind of immature. If you have a look at it on GitHub, like it doesn't look like there's much activity going on around it. And also maybe a consideration for the future, I'm not so sure about this, is that we have this new idea about contracts-driven testing. And then again, if we couple that to Titan, how would we break that out later so that we could maybe interact with some of the contract stuff? So we had a look instead at, there's a couple of services that what they allow you to do is act as a proxy between yourself and the service that you're interested in. And then you can capture the communication between your service and that service, and then later on you can play that back. The two big solutions for that seem to be something called Mountebank and another one called Hoverfly. So we had a look at both of them. For some reasons that I'll go into maybe a little bit later, it looks like Hoverfly is probably the best way to do it. So I'll give a little demonstration of how you would use that right now. I don't want to spoil anything, so just don't look at that. In Hoverfly, it gives you a couple of tools, but basically, one of the main differences between this and Mountebank is an entirely web API driven interface, whereas this is command line. So that maybe makes it a little bit easier to work with. So just give you a really basic demo of how you can use it. So you start the service up. Okay, so let's assume that it was stopped. So start up. It gives you an admin port and the proxy port. So listening now on the admin port is quite a nice web UI where you can view the requests and everything else. I can maybe show you that later if you're interested in having a look. So it works in a bunch of modes. So there's a different mode which is called capture. And that failed to start proxy. Just already in use.
3500 is already in use.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it's the other command. So I've set it to capture mode, and now I can do something like, if I just curl like an example endpoint. So what's going on here is that in curl, you can specify a proxy for it to go through, and you'll see that the port is 8500, what it's listening on. I'm just going to hit time.jsontest.com, which is going to just give me like some JSON that says what the time is at the moment. So you'll see that it just gives you, that's the JSON that is recorded. And then we can export that if we give it a file name. So I'll just call it, CTL exports. And then, yeah, let's call it time.json, why not? Okay, and then we can have a little look at that if you like. Okay, so it gives you a chunk of JSON, and this is the way that you configure Hoverfly. So you can see underneath data, it's got two parts, the request and the response. This is really similar to how Mountebank works. So the request just says that if you go to / with a get on the domain test time.jsontest.com, if you're using the HTTP scheme, then I'm configured to give you back this response. So it's just captured exactly what we had there. So you can see in the body is the time that we had. So you can imagine, like, if you needed to extend this, you could have as many requests, as many responses as you need. But the other cool thing that we can do now is just CTL mode simulate. So if we curl a second time now, you'll see it's exactly the same as the first one. So it's done the match on that little bit, and it's just given us the data back. So I mean, that's it. It's like a really basic example of how we'd be able to use this. So the way that we imagined this working was that we'd have our Hoverfly instance that would be set between Titan and all of the other services. We'd run the suite of acceptance tests in capture mode. That would give us a bunch of JSON that describes all of the communications that happen during the running of those tests. Then we'd be able to export that and then just have it in simulate mode. So then whenever you hit it again, it's just going to give you the same response back. You can do a bunch of cool things here, though. So it isn't just limited to like just doing JSON request, JSON response. You can capture middleware in this as well. So one of the really nice advantages of this over something like Mountebank is that your middleware is just any script, and it uses standard input as the request, and it uses standard output as the response. Whereas if you were going to do that in something like Mountebank, then you'd have to have an anonymous JavaScript function. But so now we can use absolutely anything. You know, you could have like some kind of bit of COBOL or something that's sat in between those things, and it could just be running like that. So that can obviously introspect on the request, and then it can just give you back whatever you want in terms of the response. So what came out of the investigation was how we would now get this into the acceptance environment so that it would be able to start intercepting the requests. So there's a couple of tickets that are now on the Titan boards. I think the first sensible thing to do is to get this containerized so that like it's part of Usher and that it can run in the environment with everything else. The next thing that we'd want to do is to be able to get it so that, like I say, when you run the suite of acceptance tests, it captures all of that, and then it stores all of the JSON that it needs. And then the final thing would be like, so you've got it containerized and you've run it in capture mode. Now you want to switch it to simulate mode. I'm not totally sure how we'd go about that, but so we have the ticket there to do it. And the thing is as well, if any of those endpoints change, then you'd want to be able to do it again. So you'd want to be able to capture it and then simulate it again. And again, this is like maybe an exciting opportunity for that to tie in with the stuff that's going from like the contract-driven stuff. Because what you could do is, if you have the contracts, you could parse them, and then you could automatically be generating the JSON from that. So you wouldn't even have to do the capture simulate thing. You could, in acceptance, say, does this version of Titan work with this version of the contracts, right? Because we should be able to programmatically say, if this is what the contract says, this is the kind of structure of thing that we should be getting back. I can go, if anybody's interested, because I know we did discuss Mountebank to begin with, I can talk about like why we thought Hoverfly was maybe a bit of a better choice. But yeah, if there's any questions anybody had.
Yeah, I think if you can go through the details of why Hoverfly seems the best option, I think it will be good.
So there's a few reasons. So the first and probably most facile is that the documentation for Hoverfly is way more straightforward than the documentation for Mountebank. And it was incredibly easy to get it up and running in this proxy mode, which looks like it's going to be super valuable just to get something out there as quickly as possible. The comparative configuration for Mountebank compared to when we had a look at that time.json is this in Mountebank would be an absolute beast, and it would have like all of these predicates all over the place, all of this like specific vocabulary that doesn't really feel like it needs. So that was an initial turnoff. The other thing is, so I discussed earlier about the middleware. In Hoverfly, it's anything. In Mountebank, it's JavaScript. So it depends how much you like JavaScript. The other thing with it is, so Mountebank is purely a open source project. Hoverfly is an open source project, but it also has like a paid support version. And so if we ever needed that in the future, then at least that's an option. It also means that the repo is really well maintained. And the other thing, I mean, this is debatable, but I'm going to stick it in there anyway. Mountebank is written in JavaScript, uses the Node ecosystem. Hoverfly is written in Go. So, yeah, those are the main differences, I think.
We see the admin UI.
Oh yeah, sure.
Has a UI?
Yeah. So it's good. Okay, so
No.
This might actually not turn out to be that impressive, to be honest. I'm gonna
have to change the
I'm gonna have to figure out how to share it. Sorry, 1 second. This is gonna make excellent viewing on YouTube, isn't it? All right, so where's that window? Okay, so that should be shared now. So you can see it gives you a little breakdown, but this is also a way that you can just go in and change the mode that it's on. So it's on simulate mode right now, change it to capture, modify, synthesize. But it's just quite sweet. It just gives you like a little breakdown of what's been going through it. And yeah, so like I was saying, the alternative to that is Mountebank, which gives you just like, I mean, I'd hesitate to say even RESTful. It's like trying to work with Elastic, so you have to curl everything to it. So it's a lot of curling, basically.
Mm-hmm. And the paid option is the only thing that it provides support, or does it provide any features as well?
I'm not actually sure about that. I'd have to check. So the main thing about the paid option is that they have like some kind of cloud thing. So it's like as a service. So you can have like a whole thing of Hoverfly instances running, basically.
So the idea would be to have this within the Titan kind of ecosystem, like have it on the same Docker container, or how do you see this going from?
So the way that I imagined this working was that it would be its own self-contained thing, because I didn't feel like Titan should have the knowledge of the thing that's doing this. And then maybe at a network level, it would be possible to set this as the proxy, so it would be able to intercept all the requests. But also, like, this should just be able to be switched out by anything, right? And everything should just continue working. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to. That was maybe one of the reasons why I wasn't so keen on VCR, was that then we would have to put that inside Titan, and it already feels like Titan is responsible for doing quite a lot of things. Whereas if we could have this. So I could imagine it working really nicely with its own repository, its own Team City build. So you can just go on, you can see, you know, what's the state of this thing.
Yeah.
If we split it out, I think that would be sweet.
Yeah. It would be better.
And what about the third option where we don't use a proxy server, or we don't record and replay the requests like how VCR does, but instead we mock those requests ourselves inside of Titan, like individually, one by one?
So that feels like you would just be creating a worse version of VCR, unless there's something significantly different about it. So one of the nice things, sorry, about Mountebank was that it suggested a way of doing things where at the beginning of so say you've got a Cucumber feature, at the beginning of it, you set up all your expectations. So you do the same thing if you're mocking an object, right? You're mocking a service instead. So you say, like, I want to call it with this thing and I want to get this thing back. And it's quite nice just because it's explicit. And then you have the teardown step where you're like, okay, destroy that service. And I can still see, like, you could definitely abstract that into its own thing, which is like responsible for setting up the mocks before it happens. But I think by having it, again, yeah, like going to a separate service, it just gives you all of those benefits, doesn't it? I would have said.
Any other questions?
All right. Thanks, everyone. Very tepid response. All right, goodbye.